I'm Chris from the Starling Tribune, a proud member of the Gonna Geek Network, just like the show you're listening to now. The opinions expressed are those of the individual host. Check out all the other great podcasts at GonnaGeek.com, and get ready because geekiness begins in 3, 2, 1.
Hello and welcome to episode 99 of Better Podcasting. Today, we're going to tell you why you should ignore all that advice that says, as a new podcaster, you should ignore your stats.
In this week's Better Podcasting download, we're going to tell you about an iOS app change that might help you.
And finally, in this week's Better Podback, we're going to get into all that overdue feedback and turn in our library fees.
Lauren, start the show now.
Welcome to Better Podcasting, a show where we talk about podcast tips, tools, and best practices to help you succeed with your podcast. What makes us different? Well, just like you, we podcast purely out of the love and fun of it. Podcasting is our hobby, and we recognize that it's yours too. We always encourage your questions and feedback, and you can find all of our contact information at betterpodcasting.com. Here's your host for the show, Stephen John Drew and Stargate Pioneer.
Hello and welcome to episode 99 of Better Podcasting. I am Stephen John Drew, and with me, of course, is Stargate Pioneer.
Hi, I'm SP, and I'm speaking into an Electro Voice RE320, and I cannot wait for the Star Wars premiere of The Last Jedi on December 15th, 2017.
Oh man, that is such an awesome shout out there. Like, for you to talk about Star Wars. No, that's a joke. SP yesterday did an awesome shootout. We talked about last week how we have spun off the Gonna Geek Gear YouTube reviews to their own channel. You can find it at www.geeks.link/GonnaGeekGear. That's www.geeks.link/GonnaGeekGear. Check that out there. Subscribe if you can. But SP decided to one-up my microphone shootout that I did, and he knew I had one in the hopper. No, he did a great job of doing a fantastic comparison of the Audio-Technica BPHS1 headset. There was a Facebook post that was asked recently about what people thought of that compared to some handheld microphones. So SP took the challenge, and not only did he compare it to some of the discussed handheld microphones, he got out his full slate of big boy microphones, and it was a good shootout. So if you want to check that out, it's www.geeks.link/BPHS1 will take you right to the YouTube video. But if you go to the YouTube channel, the Gonna Geek Gear YouTube channel, you'll check that out. So thanks for doing that, SP.
You're welcome. I had a lot of fun doing it. We were talking about it before the show. It was like going home to my Sennheiser E935 microphone. I'm still going to use the Electro Voice RE320 during the podcast. It's a broadcast, large diameter, dynamic cardioid microphone. It's meant to do this sort of stuff with podcasting in the studio. It was great, but I started Better Podcasting on the Sennheiser E935. It was so cool using that again, and I can't wait for the next opportunity to use it as well. So it was just great getting that one out and all the other toys that I have around the studio.
Oh, they were fantastic. So check that out if you do like microphone shootouts. If you like microphones as well, we're going to encourage you to head on over to the podcast forum. That's right. The podcast forum is a place that you can talk about all things podcast related. We launched it a few months back. We took a bit of a lull with the promotion over the summer because we realized that, honestly, you got better things to do than hang around the interwebs yelling at people like me and SP on different YouTube channels. No, we took a break, but you can check it out. It is in full swing. There's still lots of activity. It is thepodcastforum.com. And if you want to talk about microphones, you should check out a certain topic that's on there. If you go to www.geeks.link/favmic, that's FAVMIC, you'll go right to the thread where we are asking the question, what is your favorite microphone? And this is for you. This is not your favorite microphone to recommend to others or the most well-rounded microphone. This is your favorite microphone. So you could be like, my favorite microphone is the one that the one and only Stargate Pioneer sign for me. That could be your favorite microphone. Or you could be like, my favorite microphone is the one that Stephen John Drew licked. If we want to know, what is your favorite microphone and why?
Stephen, have you started licking microphones again? I thought we cured you. I thought we sent you to some sort of therapy and you stopped licking your microphone.
I'm a recovering addict. Sorry.
Oh my. I'm sorry if anybody has received a microphone from Stephen. We didn't realize he was doing this lately, so sue him.
Oh, awesome. So please do chime in over there on the podcastforum.com. While you're there, you should also give us a bit of an answer to a question that we ask all the time. Right, SP?
Yeah, every single episode, we want to know how you saved your podcast. We want your stories on how you took what was in ruins and you were able to save it, or even if you weren't able to save it. We want to know because we could get that information out to other people and tell them what to do, what not to do, what to look out for, what to prepare for. So that is you educating all of the other podcasters that listen to this show, how I saved my podcast. So get that into us in email form is great. If you want to email a link, we do prefer video files, but we'll take audio. We'll even take an email. Heck, we'll even take tweets. Hey, Stephen, did you know that Twitter is actually expanding from 140 to 280 characters?
I heard about that, which to me is awesome because that means less tweet 1 of 2s that I have to see. Instead, it'll be tweet 1 of 100 is what it'll be.
I've heard that too. So good luck with that, everybody. Let's keep to 1 tweet per cause.
Last week in the Better Podcasting Download, we mentioned briefly in an offhanded remark that podcasters often obsess with their stats. They are so obsessed with their stats. In fact, if you go to any podcast community, you'll all often see this question asked. What do I do to get my stats to go up? You see that all the time. You see people asking that sort of question. Well, we here at Better Podcasting want to talk about how wonderful stats are. Now, we do think that you should not obsess over your stats, but we also want to highlight that as a new podcaster, often you can get a lot of valuable data from your stats. So when you see people replying with the same thing, which is, you're new, don't worry about your stats, don't look at your stats, don't worry about that. We don't necessarily agree with that because there is a lot of important things that you can get from looking at your stats. Right, SP?
I'm sorry. I was looking at my stats. Were you saying something?
Oh, I knew you. Oh.
Yes. Now, obsessing over stats is bad. I would agree with that, especially if you're brand new, because quite frankly, you're not going to get a lot of listens when you're brand new, unless you're a celebrity already, in which case you really won't have to worry about gaining all those listeners. You just tell them to come on over and they'll come on over. But you should not ignore your stats right when you launch. There's several reasons why paying attention to stats, not religiously, not every hour, but on a routine basis is actually good for you. And you should absolutely pay attention to your stats. Here's some reasons why, right? So we'll start off with the most obvious. Is your show getting any traffic at all? And by any traffic, we mean any traffic at all. You should at least see some polls from the podcast directories which you've applied to that actually continuously host your file. And if that's not happening, then there's something wrong with the upload, or you haven't actually put your RSS feed incorrectly. It's rare when a show does not get any traffic. I mean, if you have zero, if you have nothing, and you have indeed published your show, it could be something wrong with your stats. It could be something wrong with your RSS feed. It could be something with your file, like you uploaded an AAC or a WAV file and it actually should be MP3. So there's a variety of different reasons why you should not get zero for a download statistic on any show, especially after a week after you have published your show.
There is one possibility, which is that Stargate Pioneer hacked in. He hacked on into your show and he took it down. He's been known to do that a few times.
Yeah, I collude with the DCMA and we take down shows just for no good reason whatsoever.
Oh, okay. So now that you've confirmed that your show is actually on there and you can see that somebody's downloading it, well, what else can you find as a valuable new podcaster in the podcast world? Well, you can see if you're retaining your listeners. Now, this is something that you have to kind of look at the bigger picture, but what you can do is see whether or not your listeners are staying with you week after week. We've talked about it before that if you see your numbers start to dwindle, there's something that you're doing wrong and you're just not capturing them and holding them. But we have a certain important note about this, right, SP?
Yeah. So if your podcast statistics, download statistics dwindle, especially after about 5 episodes, after you've seen an uptick or after you've initially launched, that's probably because iTunes, now Apple Podcasts, has this funky little thing. Well, they'll not unsubscribe, but they'll stop downloading podcasts in the RSS feed. So if people are not listening to your podcast, it will stop. Like if you get mom and dad to subscribe to your show and they don't listen to any podcasts, all they use a phone for is, well, a phone. You're like, why do you pay $1,000 for an iPhone to use it as a phone? But your parents do, and they just don't listen to the podcast. Well, after 5 episodes, the podcast app will stop downloading episodes. So that is a consideration as well once you start declining in download statistics for your new episodes.
This is one of my favorite ones out of our list, which is you can see if you are enticing people to check your back catalog. This one is fun, especially as you go on with your podcastery. You might see that all of a sudden you have all of your episodes downloaded. That's a good indication somebody has gone and is actually checking out your back catalog. Well, it's a little easier to tell that when you are newer, but if you're doing that, like let's say you're on episode 5 and now you've noticed that the previous ones were all downloaded in a day. Well, that means that you've had somebody probably check out one of your shows and they want to hear them all. That is awesome. That means that you're doing something right to connect with them and make them want to hear more. SP sees this all the time because he is the one that obsesses over stats. We talked about last week how he has behind his backdrop all of the stats printed out. What you don't know is he also has bed sheets, which are all of his stats.
I have them printed out on a monthly basis, just so if I wake up in the middle of the night, and it's glow in the dark too. So the sheets are glow in the dark and the ink, it stands out from them. So I can clearly see what my stats are. Darren, no, I don't do that. But I can tell you that I did check our statistics for this show right before we went on air. And I did notice in the past 3 days, we've had a lot of new listeners. I did see multiple downloads throughout the entire back catalog. So you can go into, if you have reputable statistics, and we use Libsyn for this podcast, reputable statistics. A lot of people rave about the stats and the ability to have it laid out. You can see the amount of downloads per show throughout your entire catalog. And that's exactly what happened over the last 3 days. So it does happen to shows that have been around for 100 episodes, shows that have been around for 5 episodes. You can see those new listeners come in. So if you're listening to Better Podcasting for the first time, welcome, because we know that you have checked us out, and thank you very much for downloading the entire back catalog. We really appreciate it.
And since we're talking to somebody who is downloading the back catalog, I will just say, I hope you're enjoying your flying car.
Because it's going to take that long to get through all of it.
All right. One other thing that is very interesting is you can tell if you are in all the wrong places, right, SP?
Yeah, so some statistics, it's different from provider to provider, but some statistics, you can actually see the country of origin of where you are coming from. And if you have no downloads coming from any country that speaks your language, that's probably a problem. Like if you only, like Better Podcasting, if we only had people from, I don't know, China that are downloading the podcast and outside of Hong Kong, odds are it's probably not going to be people interested in English speaking hobby podcasting. I mean, it could be people that are trying to learn how to speak English. You never know that for sure. But more than likely you're being web scraped or hacked in some way, shape, or form or another. So it is a problem that could, in fact, happen.
Absolutely. Other thing that you can see by having your stats on your radar when you're starting out is you can see if you have had a sudden spike and you're brand new, what is the error? Because the odds are if you have a massive increase and you're brand new, it's probably an error. Now, we talked a little bit about before how there are shows that they see the spike and they think to themselves, this is my new level. This is the bar that I should stay at. Well, that's just not the reality. The reality is if all of a sudden you get a spike, whether you've been doing it a while or you are brand new, something has happened. Now, when you do have more exposure and you're found more easily because you've been doing it for a while and you're getting your listener base, that might mean that you've actually done a piece of content that is really enticing. For example, on this show, Better Podcasting, episode 65. Trumps all of the rest of the episodes because it was really enticing to some people as far as downloads go. But if you're brand new, the chances are if you see a sudden spike, something's gone wrong. The example I like to use with this is early on in the Better Podcasting days, we found that our site was actually being scraped and there was a bunch of false traffic coming our way.
Yeah, it's not all bad, by the way. The web scraping is bad, but it's not all bad. Like, you could have been featured in somebody's newsletter. You could have been retweeted somewhere by an account that has hundreds of thousands of followers. You could have been shared on Facebook in just the right manner. You could have gotten even news coverage somewhere. You could have been on an article which explains, hey, you can get all this great content about this topic in these different places, including this podcast. And it's literally somebody that has just searched and then thrown that up there. We actually had that happen with one of the podcasts on the network. It was Tyrion's Landing. It was an article about Game of Thrones podcasts, and all of a sudden Tyrion's Landing was on there. And I was like, hey. So I called up Jeannie. Jeannie's the producer of Tyrion's Landing. I said, you didn't tell us you were going to be featured on this article. What happened there? How'd you get on there? And she's like, what? Wait, what? And she explained to me that she had no idea. So she went in her stats and definitely saw a bump from it. So it can happen, and it does happen.
Another thing that you can find out in there is if you're actually listed where you think you're listed. Now, SP said before, it depends on your stats provider, but in Libsyn, there is a great little spot there that in the traffic sources, you can see specific podcatchers and you can see where things are being pulled. iHeartRadio, for example, shows up in the Libsyn stats. So if you think you're on iHeartRadio, you'll see some traffic coming in that way and you'll know you're actually on there. So that is a great example of how you can find out if you're listed where you think you're listed.
You can also see if you're having a problem within certain download circles. Like if you're getting all your downloads from your mobile downloads from iOS and none from Android, you need to pump up that promotion and marketing towards the Android side of things. Now, granted, Android's not as big as iOS as far as downloads in terms of the aggregate, but if you're getting no Android downloads, odds are something's wrong or you just haven't marketed to the right people. So you need to look into that as well. So it's not just the distribution places, it's also the technology. Like if you're getting all your downloads through Chrome browser, you're like that can't be right. There's a significant amount of people out there that still use Mac OS and Safari. So why aren't they getting it? So you just need to look in that. And also you can see if you are Twitter bombing. Now, if you are Twitter bombing, you should know this, first of all, because you've set up the fact that you're Twitter bombing. But there is a section which will give you information of where your traffic is going. And if it's coming from the sole source of Twitter, odds are you're not doing something right, because Twitter will get you some downloads. But if you're getting like 95% of your downloads from Twitter, it's probably because you're actively doing that or you're paying somebody to actively do that. And the people that look at stats actually want to see that information once they try to verify if it's true or not, and they'll find out. So don't Twitter bomb. We don't advocate Twitter bombing here. It's a bad tactic. And yes, you can tweet a link or two, maybe even a day, but not hundreds, not thousands. Don't do that. That's bad.
And if you are doing that and you don't realize it, you should take a look to see how it's being posted out there. Like, what are you posting? And maybe you need to make a couple of changes with the way that you tweet. Speaking of social media, you can also see if the wonderful Facebook, the best place to be social, if Facebook is working for you. Because a lot of people have this enabled through their different media hosts and their distribution channels where it automatically posts to Facebook. Well, sometimes with Facebook, because of the way that it works and it doesn't always show the latest post to everybody and it can be complicated. If you're seeing no traffic coming from Facebook, you know that something's not right with your Facebook post and you might want to go try to recraft that. Facebook is one that can be really hard to engage with your Facebook followers. And if you're not seeing anything from Facebook, then you got to flip things up a little bit. Maybe you got to get a little more creative with your posts. Maybe you have to use an image. Maybe you have to do something like saying, look at this episode. Stargate Pioneer does the entire show with a bald head.
Yeah, that'll be next week. I'm just going to shave off my head. That's the big thing for Steven. You gave away episode 100 already.
Sorry.
Jeez.
My bad.
There is one style of promotion that is working better for you than others. You will know it. So when you're new to podcasting, you often take a bit to find what promotional style you want to use for your show. It could be a method such as the actions you take to actively promote, or it could be the language within your poster title, the SEO, the search engine optimization, as we almost always call it. But if you see a sudden spike, you can rule out such things as web scraping or Twitter bombing that we spoke about. You might want to analyze what you did differently that week so you can try to replicate in a future week to see if it works. So once again, if you see a sudden spike and you can rule out some nefarious sort of hacking like web scraping or Twitter bombing, then you want to duplicate that. Now, if it is web scraping or Twitter bombing, that's another thing for you to handle as well. There's also something that we've talked about before. It's a little handy dandy, kind of a backdoor way to count subscribers that I came up with. Basically, it's take a look at your downloads that are day 1 and day 2. And that's most likely when the most people that have subscribed to you are able to download your podcast. And just take a look at that download numbers day 1, day 2 over time. If it goes up, that means your subscriber count is going up. If it's going down, that means your subscriber count is going down. It's just a little backdoor hack. It's not actually, it doesn't correlate to anything other than if somebody's subscribed to their show, especially if it's on their phone, odds are they're going to be within Wi-Fi range and they're going to be able to download that show within the first 48 hours of it being out. So if you're interested just to guesstimate how many subscribers you can have, that is a way to do it.
Now, since we're talking about all of the great ways that you can use your stats as a new podcaster, we should also make sure to talk about some of the common pitfalls that we see that newbies do with their stats. Well, obviously, number one is you need to be okay with you being new and your numbers being smaller. It takes time. It takes time. Say it with me. It takes time. You don't want to sit there and think everybody else has more numbers than me who have been doing this higher. No, if you come from that place, it's not good. It's not good. And also, don't analyze your stats on a daily basis, because you are better as somebody who is new is to look at things in more of a larger and overview manner. This is something that if you take this approach and you look at your stats, not on a daily, obsessing, hourly basis, and you look at the common trends and the growth, it's going to be a lot better for you than sitting there and watching paint dry, because that's what you're doing.
Yeah, and we've often talked about the paint drying podcast on this podcast, and we have that podcast, and I haven't seen any increase in numbers. I guess paint drying is not such a podcastable topic as we once thought, Stephen.
I'm surprised. Maybe you know what it needs to be? Watching stats. That'll be the podcast where we just talk about how we're watching stats.
Oh, we got a new one. We got a new download. Oh, look, they downloaded episode 50. Yay.
Exactly. What's another common pitfall, SB?
Don't think that a sudden increase is your new baseline. As we mentioned, there are many things that cause a spike. And while it is very exciting to see that uptick in numbers, it might not be sustainable. You might have gotten that one hit from a newsletter or retweet or an email or whatever it is, or a class assignment in some college or high school. So you got a couple hundred additional downloads. Yeah, it's just one. And that's all you're going to get. Yeah, you might get a couple of new people. You might build 1 to 3, but you're not going to get hundreds and hundreds from an event like that. So don't have the expectation that you've jumped from 100 downloads per episode to 700 downloads per episode in 1 week, and that's going to stay that way. That sort of hockey stick growth, quote unquote, that we've heard so much about in the podcasting circles. It just doesn't happen. You're talking slow and steady growth between 2 and 10% a year is what you really should expect. So don't go to a Facebook group either, or any social media site and say, my numbers are, I only get 50 downloads. How do I increase them? Or I only get 2,000 downloads. How do I increase them? I only get $10,000 downloads. How do I increase them? First of all, yeah, I don't want to hear how many downloads you have or don't have. I am, as a better podcasting host, I am curious as to how I can help you, but yeah, it just takes time. And sometimes you plateau, sometimes you go up, sometimes you go down. But yeah, it's a slow growth.
Yeah, there's no magic wand, and you need to recognize that there is no magic formula. And as more and more people come into the podcast world, well, guess what? It's only going to get worse. Now, one thing that I want to say is don't only look at the number. We literally just gave you a full segment about other things to pay attention to than the number. So if you're only obsessing with the number, slap your wrist now. And then also slap your wrist for SP, your other one, because you just don't obsess with just the number. It's such a bad move.
Yeah. So you want to look at trends, you want to look at specifics, and you don't want to obsess about, I got 30 downloads this week. I'm going to get 40 next week. I'm going to get 50 the week after. I've got 100 this year. I want 300 next year. Yeah, those are all lofty goals, but just don't obsess about them. Take a look at them once a quarter, once a year, not every week, not every day, not every hour. That's not going to work for you. So there you go. Now you know why it's so important to look at your stats when you launch, but also what to pay attention to specifically. And if you have a story or a certain perspective of how you look at your stats, and especially how you looked at your stats upon when you launched, please let us know. You can contact Better Podcasting at podcast@betterpodcasting.com. On Twitter, we're at BetterPod, and Facebook, we're at Better Podcasting as well.
Welcome to this week's Better Podcasting Download.
All right, SP, I did it. You told me about this download, so I went out, got myself a guitar. I brought a couple friends into my garage. We plugged in all of our instruments, and we started our GarageBand.
Right. So what we're talking about is not new, but it's the first time we talked about it on Better Podcasting. It's been around for a while. The program itself has been around in Mac OS for quite some time, years and years and years. If you've been around since the start of podcasting, there's been 2 free programs which you could use, Audacity to edit and GarageBand over on the Mac OS side. You can also use Audacity at the Mac OS side. Well, they've transitioned GarageBand to iOS, and it's been there for a while as well. But starting in January, every new phone actually came with this free app of GarageBand. Now, GarageBand in the app form is a little bit different than what it is actually on the Mac OS, but you can use it to record. You can use it to synthesize. You can use it to play different instruments. You can create music through GarageBand. And it's important to note that you have this, especially if you have a new iPhone. Now, what I happen to have in my hand is a new iPhone. I just got it last Friday. It's an iPhone 8 Plus, and it came with GarageBand. And as I restored the phone from my old iPhone 6 Plus, all of a sudden I noticed that there was one new app on the first 2 screens, and it was GarageBand. I'm like, where did this thing come from? It's not one that I owned or anything. So a couple of days go by, and I see an article that says that it is new for all new iPhones from now on. Now, if you have an older iPhone, you can still download the app, I believe, for $5. I don't know if they've waived that yet or not with iOS 11, but it is on there. So it's something that you can use. In the past, for soundboards, I have used Boss Jock Studio. This is all iOS, guys, so it's not applicable to Android, but I've used Boss Jock Studio as my predominant soundboard on multiple devices. I have a separate device for each show just so I don't get the soundboard screwed up. I've also used something called iJingle, and iJingle is really good for a clip show because Boss Jock Studio is a little bit limited in the amount of actual sound clips that you can play on one screen, depending on how big your device is. So iJingle, you can have a lot more there, and I've used that as well. Now, to edit, I've used the Twisted Wave app. So those are all apps that I've used, and I don't do a lot of mobile production. I've done, I don't know, maybe I can count on my one hand. I think it was 3 times the amount of times that I've used Twisted Wave to actually edit something that I've produced. But it is there. It is available. So GarageBand is kind of similar. It's kind of like Twisted Wave with Boss Jock Studio together. And I haven't had a lot of experience using it. So this is more of an informational dump to our listeners that it is available if you didn't know it. And also, if you actually have used it, we want to know what your thoughts are of it because we don't have any experience. I'm going to try it out over the next few weeks, but we don't have anything to say about it right now. Now, the early reviews that I've read is that it's kind of mixed for GarageBand and iOS. There's some people that say, yay, and some people say, I wish it could do more. And that's probably true of any app, but I don't know specifically until I get in to use it. Now, Stephen, you've read just about the same things, right?
Yeah, I gotta say that I know that this was like the latest major update came in January, but I'm seeing more and more people talk about this right now as they get new iPhones and whatnot, like you mentioned. So I'm so glad that you brought this up because I think that a lot of people, when their phone starts to get old and dated and whatnot, they don't look at things like this because it's becoming less reliable for them and their phone is. So why would they go and try to do something with their podcast? So while a lot of these features may be 9 months old, I think it's worth exploring if you are an iPhone user and are interested in get yourself a new iPhone because things also work differently depending on the device that you have and the model of it that you have. So we want to know, what do you personally think about this? But I will say that I'm looking forward to seeing SP review this further because I do not use Apple products. Well, I use a couple Apple products in the house, but I generally don't have Apple products. I am an Android guy, so I am out of the loop on GarageBand.
One thing to note about it, just off the cuff that I know, is that I actually had to pay for Boss Jock Studio. I actually caught it on a sale $5 years ago, and it's still applicable to everything that I have, so that's good. iJingle, I think I paid about $10, maybe $20 for the pro version. I'd have to go back and look. And Twisted Wave was also a paid app for me. I paid for the premium version of both iJingle and Twisted Wave. GarageBand is free. So if you're just looking to get a free app, GarageBand is it on a new phone. And if you can pay a few dollars, you might want to look into other things as well, like Twisted Wave and Boss Jock Studio. I've heard from many people that Boss Jock Studio is great to actually record in, but editing, not so much. And I did try once, and lo and behold, that's why I have Twisted Wave. So that is the short story of the iOS mobile apps, but just wanted to throw that out there, not gloat over the fact that I get a new phone. And you know what, Stephen? My phone is going to be old in another month anyway, because the iPhone 10 is coming out. So my phone will be old junk by then.
While we were talking briefly about your phone, we should also take a moment to acknowledge that, yes, SP did get himself an iPhone 8. And on that iPhone 8 does not have a 3.5 millimeter jack. Now, the reason I'm bringing this up is not to dig in SP or anything like that, but it's something that I want to have your first thoughts as somebody who has finally started using the Lightning adapter, but is a podcaster that has a few different adapters and devices that are meant to go into that 3.5 millimeter. What's your thoughts, SP?
Well, it does come with the dongle that has the 3.5 millimeter jack in there, which is good. And the problem that a lot of people were having before is, well, how do you charge it and use the 3.5 millimeter jack? Again, I was listening to the Bandrew Says podcast this week, and apparently there's a new Belkin Lightning adapter out now that has both charge capability and the 3.5 millimeter capability. Well, while that is good and awesome for people that have older phones, my phone actually has the ability to do the wireless induction QI charging. So I'm okay with taking up that lightning port jack with the dongle in it because I have the actual wireless charging to it. So yes, I was one of the detractors of the iPhone. Like, I can't believe you took my 3.5 millimeter jack away. Well, I still have it and I still can charge at the same time now. So I guess I waited for the right version of the phone. I guess I wish I could have waited another year, but that iPhone 6 was literally on its last legs. My wife was like looking at me because I was swearing every time I used it. It was so slow by the time I actually flipped it over to this one.
SP says bad words. There's your revelation of the day.
SP says a lot of bad words, actually. You know that. It's in the chat all the time.
I know nothing. But let's go ahead and move into our Better Pod Back.
We asked, how would you best describe how you cultivate audience engagement on your podcast? Is there a method that has worked best for you? And in true Twitter poll fashion, there were 4 choices that really didn't make as much sense as they should have. One was provide contact information. Another was ask my audience questions. A third was accomplish surveys and polls. And a fourth was ask for guest hosts. And by far and large, the first 2 provide contact information and ask my audience questions won the poll. Now, that was the poll, but we did have people actually reply to the tweet. Jeremy T. Dennis over at the Transmissions podcast said, we first engaged on Twitter to much success. Now we have a Discord server and the audience has become a community. And it has indeed. I've been in that community and it is a thriving. Stephen, it is amazing the amount of Transformer fans that are out there even today. So that's cool. Also, Heather Welsh responded and she said, by interacting in groups where my audience is. So that is another successful way that you can cultivate engagement just by the one-on-one discussions that you have.
We also had Johnny Pennington send us an email, and Johnny said, hey guys, I had planned on buying something else this month, but I received a deal notice that I had to get. I'm hoping to get your opinion on it. I've always heard good things about this company. The deal was normally $499, that's $499, which is for a Focusrite Scarlett 18i20 second generation USB audio interface with 8 channels and preamps for $339. That sounded good. I needed to purchase an interface. When I went on the page, there was an old-fashioned telephone receiver icon that perhaps only people like me would recognize. It had call for help or coupon codes. I'm not very good with computers, but I'm a whiz on the phone, and I asked about the coupon code, and the representative helped me putting it in. The bottom line is I bought it for $288. That's right, $288, he said, plus tax. Any thoughts? Johnny. Wow, that's fantastic.
Really good deal on an 18i20. Matter of fact, Stephen and I, about a year and a half ago, we were looking into these Focusrite Scarlett interfaces, and there was a couple of really neat songs written, like videos that were produced on YouTube about them, and got to know a little bit more about their capabilities. The 18i20 is amazing for what it is. The unfortunate fact is it didn't have the capabilities of mix minus that I wanted at the time that I was looking for something, which is why I ended up with the Mackie, but it is an excellent interface in of its right. Now you have to have a certain requirement set for it. You have to have the requirement for 8 microphone inputs and stuff like that. Otherwise it's too much interface for most people. So don't overbuy. You want to buy for a little bit of growth, but you don't want to buy for this big honking audio rack of stuff that's just going to sit barely used on your desk. And you've spent a lot of money that you might not actually recoup back. So those are my thoughts about it, but that is an amazing piece. And to get it for $288, wow, that's amazing.
Yeah, and I'll just echo what SP said, plus say that if you are looking for an audio interface anyways, and you get that deal, like you're probably going to pay like $100 to $150 for a quality audio interface. So it's not much more of a jump. You might as well have the feature set as long as you're prepared to deal with maybe some of the complications that comes with having that many channels. I have had interfaces that have lots of channels. I have had interfaces that have had little channels. There is an advantage sometimes to having one that just has what you need, just what you need. There is lots of advantages to having expandability. So, Johnny, thanks for emailing us on that. That's fantastic.
Yeah, thank you very much, Johnny. Always great to hear from you.
We also got a message from Amos.
Yeah, he's also the producer and head host of the Undaunted podcast. And he got back to us about stats. And this is a few weeks ago, and we haven't had a chance to talk about it, but we thought that this episode was going to be a great episode to actually talk about it. Now, Amos has never been shy about sharing the information about the goals and downloads with his podcast. Now, his main podcast is not actually Undaunted. It's another podcast called Ritual Misery. I was actually a guest host on that a few months back. You might have heard me talk about it on Better Podcasting a few months ago. But it's a real fun podcast. They do a lot of live stuff. They cater to the live crowd a lot, and it's really like a live talk show, and I really appreciate being a part of it. But Amos gave us a link to his stats and his goals, and they're available for each year, each calendar year. And he said, I know a lot of podcasts won't show their numbers. I was determined to break that mold, even if it's not very impressive. Anyway, feel free to use that for feedback on Better Podcasting. And we definitely appreciate that. He said that episode 92 and 93 reminded him of all this. And I remember him telling me about this when I was on his show, and he did share those numbers with me. They were very open and honest with it, which is really unusual for a podcaster. Most podcasters do not want to give away how many downloads they have, and he totally broke that mold. So for that, I say good on you, Amos, and we will put a link in the show notes to his stats so you can check them out.
Yeah, thanks for that, Amos. We also had some feedback from the one and only Josh Liston.
Yeah, Josh had a question for us, and he said, as Better Pod is both a community-oriented hobby show and also a show that receives quite a bit of long-forward feedback from a select group of your audience, do you feel any added pressure to feature that feedback on your show? And he gives a few other tidbits about live radio show and so on and so forth. But the key question there is, do we feel any added pressure to always feature that feedback on our show? Honestly, I don't feel any pressure to share any feedback on our show. I do it because this is a community-oriented show for Better Podcasting and hobby podcasters. And if hobby podcasters can learn from other hobby podcasters, I want to share that knowledge. I'm not the end all and be all for all the knowledge on hobby podcasting. Stephen, I know you're not. And together we're a little bit better. But what really makes us awesome is the fact that we have such a great engaged community. So we want to share that knowledge out to everybody else, because even though we do have a sector of our listenership that is very engaged, there's a lot of other people that aren't as engaged, but they're still getting the great information to them. So I want to share that with them. Right, Steve?
Yeah, I will say that I'm a little bit different in this scenario because I've actually brought with me my Better Podcasting contract that SP made me sign. And in there, it specifically says that SP gets final say on the way that the show doc is laid out. So when he puts the Better Pod back in there, I don't feel pressure, but, you know, I have a contract. So I guess that answers that.
Yeah, I want to say some keywords like I would if I was using my iPhone 6 Plus right now. No, Steve, that was a big joke. It really was. Now, we do have an agreement. Stephen and I do have an agreement, but that wasn't part of it.
No, I was just joking. I will, again, echo what SP said. I think that we have quickly adapted and really adopted the idea of people giving their thoughts and really being that community learning feel on the show. And there's a lot of good questions people do ask, and we get a lot of good feedback that we don't always read out, where people say they have learned something that is basically related to another piece of feedback that somebody gave us. So we don't feel pressure. We just think it's very helpful to you as a hobby podcaster learning from another hobby podcaster.
Absolutely. And there's some feedback that we haven't read on air or talked about, but that's for various reasons, not because we don't like the person, but it's just not relevant to some shows, or it's personal information that we just don't want to give out. So there are reasons not to give stuff on there, but I don't feel pressured not to share feedback.
We had also a comment from the wonderful Bandrew from the infamous Bandrew Says podcast, and of course the Podcastage YouTube channel. And he commented on a review that I did with a bunch of cheap microphones on the YouTube channel at, again, geeks.link/GonnaGeekGear. And out of the test, he said that the ATR 2100 was the key winner. He said that very clearly. Well, actually, he said it was the clear winner, but I'm going to put words in his mouth.
Yeah, that's fine. It's key, clear. It doesn't matter. Yeah, when I was listening to that, I was like, they all sound okay. And then I heard the ATR 2100. I'm like, oh my gosh, that is definitely it. And it was against the Behringer. I believe XM 8500 was one of the microphones. And there is a difference between the XM 8500 and the ATR 2100. And definitely, if you can take that step up to the 2100, I definitely would as well. We also got another YouTube comment from Scott Smith. And this was from the review that I recently did with all those 8 microphones. And he said, thanks for the review. My 2 cents, the headset microphone, which again is the Audio-Technica BP-HS1, sounded like a telephone. The Blue Knox, the E935, a little thin, and the MD46, all good, all would sound about the same to the average listener. Lots of plosives because no pop filter. And yes, I did the review without any windscreens or pop filters to try to equate all of them, because I even took the pop filter off the Electro Voice RE320 because I didn't want there to be any difference. The one exception to that, by the way, was the Audio-Technica BP-HS1. I left the windscreen on there because if I didn't, it would have been Plosive City on it. So I kept that on. So he goes on, by the way, and he says, Rode RE320 and BP40, a little richer and still lots of plosives. And once again, no windscreen, no pop filter. In my opinion, the winner would have to be the RE320. Thanks again, Scott. P.S. Why the math problem blow? I didn't know that there was going to be a test.
That was in relation to the CAPTCHA filter on the GonnaGeek.com site. We also got more comments about this video. It's been quite a heated video full of comments. We had Podcastage say, for the handhelds, I loved the MD46, which is a beautiful microphone, I gotta say. SP, you introduced that microphone to me, and I gotta say, from everything that I've heard, it sounds fantastic.
Yeah, once again, this microphone was created by Sennheiser on commission from NBC Sports as they were going to do the Olympic coverage, I believe, in Japan. And they wanted a specific microphone that would isolate crowd sounds, that would be a long-form interview microphone so you could pass it back and forth, and that it would sound good for broadcast. And thus, the MD46 was born. A lot of news sideline reporters are starting to go to the wireless microphones now because they can afford it. So now's the time to grab an MD46. As long as it hasn't been used by the Weather Channel in hurricane coverage, it's going to be an awesome microphone for you. I bought 6 of them. I bought like 8 of them, and I have 5 of them in my possession. I've given 3 to co-hosts so they can use at different conventions, but I have 5 for my mobile setup, and I got to get a hold of 1 more to complete that. So if we ever go to a convention as Gonna Geek and we have 6 people on the panel, each of those 6 people can have an MD46. It's been a great microphone. It's an awesome find. It's a little bit expensive, though. It's not the sub $100 microphone. It is a $200 microphone.
You know, a minute ago when you said that you had somebody tell you that the RE320 was their favorite microphone, well, I will read you this one. This comes from our wonderful Johnny Pennington. And Johnny said, SP, sorry, I know how you love the RE320, but the mic I liked best was the same as Stephen John Drew's favorite, the Audio-Technica BP40. all the mics you compared did sound good and would make for a fine podcast microphone. That being said, the difference for me was not so much in your voice, but the sound of the room with your voice. To me, the BP40 just seemed to open up the room, making it a more natural sound. I really enjoyed your comparison and am looking forward to many more gear reviews in the Gonna Geek Gear channel. Thanks, Johnny.
Thank you very much, Johnny. It was awesome to hear from you on that. And yeah, all these microphones are great for podcasting. I would recommend every single one of them for podcasting for various use cases and budgets. So whichever one you choose, that's on you. If it sounds good to you, that's really what the key is. Or if you have a really audiophile specific audience for some reason, and they say that one microphone works better for you than another, you probably want to go to that microphone that they want. But in general, people aren't listening as audiophiles. They're listening in the gym. They're listening in their car. They're listening through their smart home speakers. I almost said the actual word to activate it. And that is how they're listening to this stuff these days. And I think we're in an era where all you have to be is listenable. So any of those microphones would work for you. And sadly, Stephen, I realized in doing the review that the Knox podcast microphone is no longer $40. It's $59 on Amazon US.
I saw that, but I didn't see it being from Amazon directly. It looked like it was from a third party, so I was holding hope. But I'm in Canada, and it's still not available up here. But who knows? Maybe we'll get like a box microphone or something. So it'll just like end up being another version of it. Because now that we got one knockoff, maybe we'll have 20 or 200, as Bandrew from the Podcasted channel will tell you.
And he'll own all 200 of them.
And finally, before we close down the feedback, we have a bit of an extract from a fantastic podcast. We have often talked about the one and only Diami Poloki, and he does an awesome podcast called what, SP?
Modern Woodworkers Association. And on episode number 151, I had the chance to guest host that. That was awesome. And thank you very much, Diami, for allowing me to come on your podcast. And I'm available to guest host on any of your podcasts. Just look me up. I am a sucker for it. I will be on your podcast. And I think there was somebody else on the I can't remember who else was on that.
Well,
podcast.
Let's just play a section of it and find out.
Okay.
Hello, and welcome to the 151st episode of the Modern Woodworkers Association. I'm Diami Plotke. Unfortunately, due to scheduling issues, I wasn't able to join up with my friend and regular co-host, Sean. Luckily, I was able to reach out to some fellow podcasters, and I've got two wonderful guests tonight, Stephen Jondrew and his talented friend, Stargate Pioneer.
Hello.
Greetings.
Hi, guys. Thanks for coming on such short notice. Normally, this is where we discuss what's going on in the shop, but as you're both shopless, I'll move past this and right into the meat of the conversation. So, gentlemen, what is your favorite wood?
I'm a cherry wood fan. I really like cherry, and that is what my desk is, and that is what my audio rack is. It's all cherry wood.
Cherry. I like cherry, too. It's a wonderful wood to work with, and it ages to such a nice, rich tone. Stephen, what's your favorite wood?
So I want to say that personally, I'm a big cedar fan. I like cedar.
Cedar? Well, that's interesting. It's my favorite siding, but I'm not such a fan of using it to make furniture. I'm really not fond of what the furniture looks like when it's made out of cedar.
But oak is also a very high quality wood to make furniture out of.
Yes, SP, it is. That said, I must come out against it. Oak is no fun to work with, and while it can look wonderful, think of the work of Mike Pekovich, it can also look extremely pedestrian. In most generic construction, oak is used when a quality hardwood is called for. The use of golden oak is almost cliche. Now, Stephen, to get back to your cedar, when you use cedar to build a piece, do you finish it or leave it natural?
I think that cedar looks nice, especially when you get a nice varnish on there.
Varnish? I forgot. You're Canadian.
So, SP and I had a chance to guest host, and here's the thing: if you're not familiar with our back catalog that we talked about earlier. A while back, we made a little bit of a joke in one of our many tangents that we go in on the show. And all of that was from Better Podcasting. And you got to check out it. It goes for longer. So check it out. It is available at www.geeks.link/wood. That's www.geeks.link/wood. And you can check out the rest of that there. And subscribe to Diami Show while you're at it. It is awesome if you're into woodworking. And for the record, it may not be that usable right now because it has a ton of kid toys in it, but technically I got a shop a couple walls behind me.
Yeah, I've got a shop too, and unfortunately it's filled with a car and an engine right now, but I do have a shop.
So there you go. Thanks, Diami. That just made us smile. And I will tell you this. I think I shared it on this show before, but if not, I will say that I once did something very similar with my very first podcast with a local radio personality, and ended up having them guest actually for real on the show after they heard it. So I totally respect what you do. I think it's hilarious. Plus, you also got the wonderful lip gloss commercial audio music on your show. That's what you is in another place now.
Yeah, another great use of a techno pop or whatever it was. Anyway, thank you very much, Diami, for allowing us to invade your show.
Awesome. So that is going to be the end of episode 99 of Better Podcasting. We just want to go ahead and remind you that we are part of the Gonna Geek Network. And also on the Gonna Geek Network is a show called The Starling Tribune. This is a show that covers the Arrow television show as well as the rest of the related universes. Now, there was some big news in the world of Arrow and the rest of the related universe this week. So if you are into any of those shows, The Flash, Legends of Tomorrow, Arrow, you should subscribe to the Starling Tribune and listen to the show, because you can guarantee this week there's going to be a bit of talk on that.
Indeed. We had a special show lined up, and this will fit right in line with it. So can't wait to talk about it. That's Sunday night, 6 p.m. Eastern at geeks.live.
Awesome. So for episode 99, the last in the double digits, I'm Stephen John Drew saying I will do whatever I can to get you to subscribe to our YouTube channel.
And I'm SP saying I'm really excited to see The Last Jedi come out December 15th, 2017. See you guys later. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you for listening to another episode of Better Podcasting. We want to hear from you. You can find all of our contact information at betterpodcasting.com. If you like the show, please consider giving us a 5-star review in iTunes. We encourage you to check out all of the other geeky podcasts available at GonnaGeekNetwork.com. This has been a Gonna Geek production. Thanks for listening, and we will see you again next week.